Her father didn't want her to become a petroleum engineer. Women were bad luck on rigs. Lisa Stewart became a big deal in the oil industry anyway. Her time at TU helped her learn that it's really a business about people.
The interaction, because of the size that I could have with the professors and the interest that they took in me, was really important. And I took that away as I began my career, that it's a business about people.
From the very beginning, her plan was to attend TU, earn accounting and law degrees, and then work at Webco, the company her father founded. Today, Dana Weber is the tubing company's CEO, and she reflects on her special time at TU.
It was the atmosphere on campus is what really made TU. The way we could have fun together and be together, and it was just an amazing experience, and I loved it.
TU was her launch pad to Broadway, and it worked for a while. And then Rilla Askew discovered her real talent wasn't acting, but writing. This accomplished novelist and teacher credits TU with enriching her respect for the arts.
The sense of camaraderie and the sense of respect that I felt for the arts. And of course, specifically the theater arts.
I'm not sure I could tell you exactly why, but when I was in high school, I made the decision that I wanted to go to TU, that I wanted to major in accounting, and then I wanted to go to law school. And I never even looked at another school. It was just where I wanted to go. I was in town, but as my parents said, I could have been anywhere in the world because they never saw me.
I grew up most of my formative years in Tulsa, graduated from Memorial High School in '74, and went to OU for a couple of years as a journalism major. I wanted to be Barbara Walters, and I figured out that wasn't going to happen, or the odds of that happening were pretty low.
I feel like I'd known about TU for years before I ever came here. And I knew about the theater department here in that time. So I was in Tulsa, I was living in Tulsa. I was doing theater. I worked at Theater Tulsa for a time. I did some shows at PAC, and really getting ready to try to make the move to New York. But I hadn't finished my degree. But I just decided this was the place to come, and then I decided that this was the place to study theater with some really, really excellent professors.
I was in the Chi Mega sorority, absolutely loved it. In fact, if you walk through my house, you'll see little owls everywhere. And the interesting thing that you don't think about when you're there is that social network and those friendships last a lifetime. I still have a lot of friends today that I didn't even know in college, never met in college, may not have even gone to TU, but because we have that common experience of Chi Mega, we're still friends.
I went to see E.T. Guerrero, who at the time was the dean of the Petroleum Engineering School. And because my dad had been a graduate of TU in petroleum engineering, it's really what I wanted to do. And I'd been around rigs and I'd been around the industry my whole life. And so I went to E.T. and I said, please let me in. And he looked at my transcript and, it was full of lovely little things, but none of them applied to engineering. And so he told me that if I would go take a couple of math classes, that he'd consider letting me into the engineering school.
It was really well-rounded in terms of the kinds of training that I received here, and also the history of the theater. And then the performances, the shows that we were able to do. Shadowbox, which had just closed on Broadway, they brought in visiting artists from New York, and it was a really rich experience.
I started working there initially just because my dad was there all the time and it was a way to hang out with him. But over time, it really just got into my blood, and I loved it. I knew when I was going to major in accounting and go to law school that my intent was to work there. It was all about what would prepare me to be able to work there.
So I went on the training program at Cities, which was a great program, and they toured us all over the country, all their different divisions, and we did a lot of classes. And at the time, enhanced oil recovery was big. And when I finished that program, I actually went to work in the research lab for Cities, doing reservoir modeling.
So I went to New York to act, and I was there for a couple of years. I studied acting. I went to a lot of auditions. I did a few off Broadway productions. But I met the person who became my husband. His name's Paul Austin, and he's a wonderful, wonderful acting teacher. It was before we married, but while we were still engaged, he read some of my writing, and he just told me I could write. So there's something else about that being validated. So I was validated here at the University of Tulsa that I had an artistic sensibility, that I had some talent, that I had what it takes. And then after I had moved to New York and begun to do that, and with some degree of success, but I found that it wasn't my real passion. Writing novels specifically became that passion.
And I got called back to cities, and I worked for them for a couple of months in a job I wasn't all that interested in. And I started looking around, and I found this little company called Apache, and they hired me. And I kind of thought, yeah, if I do this for a couple of years, that'll be fine. But all of our wells were in western Oklahoma. I kind of got to do everything, production, reservoir. I got to be involved in the design of drilling wells, and it was fabulous. I loved the early days at Apache and never thought I'd spend 20 years of my career there.
For most of our history, we consider ourselves to be the baby alligator in the industry because we were the newest entrants. And our goal was to run silent and run deep and try not to get stomped on while we were too little. That worked for us for many years. Over time, as we grew and we became more successful and we became more diverse and our base became a lot bigger, we were no longer the baby alligator, but that mentality was hard to change.
When I would bring stories into workshop that were set in Oklahoma, they would always get a really, really positive response from the fellow workshop participants because I was writing from a real authentic place there. So my very first book is a book of stories all set in Oklahoma, in southeastern Oklahoma, a book called Strange Business. And from that, I began to write more and more about Oklahoma, so most of my novels are set in Oklahoma. I wrote a novel that I began writing in the 1990s and that was eventually published in 2001 about the Tulsa Race Massacre, writing about it in a time when it was not known or in the general public or talked about. That novel, Fire and Beulah, came out in 2001.
So I was with Apache for 20 years, wound up their vice president of business development, and I had a bunch of other things. But what I really wanted at that point was to go into an operating role. I went to work at El Paso, big pipeline corporate structure, and this is about the time of the fall of Enron, so they had a lot of debt. So I took over as president of the E&P and other non-regulated businesses. And probably the thing I took away from it was I'm really not good being the head of a subsidiary of a very large pipeline company.
My father was unique and amazing, also a TU alum. He was one of these rare people who could start a business and be an entrepreneur and yet transition from entrepreneurship into leadership and management. And he knew how to bring in the people that he needed, and he knew how to let go of things as he needed to let go of them. I always say I'm the luckiest person in the world because I had a 45-year transition.
So I made the decision to go back to school and get and to pursue a Master of Fine Arts in creative writing, focusing in fiction. So I went back to school in Brooklyn, and as often happens, as a graduate student, you get this opportunity, adjunct teaching, undergraduate freshman comp courses, and fell in love with it. The very first time I was in the classroom and up in front of the students, I felt as if I'd been there all my life.
The transition from being quiet to actually being able to talk about what we do was not an easy one to make. And now I think we're probably the most diverse tubing company, certainly in the United States, and probably maybe even in the world. Not the biggest, but especially for our size, the most diverse.
A friend of mine had reached out to me who was working for a private equity shop and said, hey, we've got this great idea. What do you think about it? And so when he was in town, we'd have lunch and talk about it, and I was trying to help him find somebody to run it. The decision at El Paso was made to sell one of the major pipelines and to keep the E&P. And so I kind of looked in my heart and said, this isn't really what I want to do. And so I said, well, I'll take the job. And so we formed a fund, effectively, Sheridan Production, that went out and raised money from institutional investors and bought oil and gas properties. And so that was 2006 that we started. We had our final close on our first fund in 2007, and it's been operating for 15 years now. So, and I retired in 2020 from the CEO role there.
In the steel business, that's an interesting thing being female. When I started in the business, I was one of very few. I remember going to industry conferences, and during the day we had meetings, In the evenings we had social events, and usually the spouses came and they were at the social events. I very quickly realized that I needed to hang out with all the spouses in the evening and not with the guys to talk business, because I needed them to understand that I was not a threat and that they could be safe with me. Of course, it was basically to make sure that I didn't have any issues in the industry, but I think as I look back on it, I think it was also helping pave the way for other women to enter non-traditional female businesses.
You know, it's interesting now, and I like to mentor young ladies who are in the industry, and there are a lot of really bright young ladies who have chosen this as a profession. Even today, if you look in the ranks of management in oil and gas companies, it's still a pretty small population. The industry's focused on it. I think we're doing better at it. But it really all starts with whether you can get young girls who are graduating from high school to go into sciences. I think that's still a problem that we face.
There are many people that have told me that they first learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre from reading Fire and Beulah. So I would say that I think it was seminal work. And so I think that's probably the thing that I'm most, I don't know if proud is quite the right word, but that I feel is significant about the work that I've done.
I'm probably most proud of what we've turned what my father started into. He created the culture and the environment, which is, a forever type of company focusing on the long term. And we have a very family environment. People really care about each other. And I just love that. We have in some cases third generations working at the company now. A lot of second generations want to continue and even want their kids to be there. To me is a huge testament.
I'm probably most proud of the people that I helped develop who are now in roles, senior roles at various companies. I have a reputation for being kind of a hard ass, and I probably am. No, I definitely am. But I think people who know me well kind of know there's a soft side too. And I really cared about the people who worked for me, and I tried to make them better. And so when you see them, in positions of responsibility, that's really what I like as I look back on it.
Part of what my body of work is, and part of who I am as a writer, comes out of my experience here at the University of Tulsa, and that the University of Tulsa acknowledges that and claims me, and that makes me really happy.
I love TU, and frankly, I think there are a lot of amazing alumni out of TU, and so it is really phenomenal honor to have this opportunity.
When the engineering school put me in the Hall of Fame, I kind of thought that was like the pinnacle of whatever I would ever be recognized for at TU. But hopefully there's a realization that I care deeply about the university and I've tried to give back, and that they recognize that. And so I'm really honored. I think it's, being a distinguished alumni, and, as I looked at the list, the one thing that kind of makes me laugh is that Rue McClanahan. So I'm kind of a golden girl now.
One of my fondest memories at TU Theater is when we did Skin of Our Teeth by Thornton Wilder, which is, it's a sort of wonderful apocalyptic story. The world is all at sixes and sevens, and it was just an excellent production.
I was actually in the first flag corps at TU, and that was a blast. We created it. We loved the sports, we loved athletics. We were totally into TU and everything that went on.
When we graduated, there was a group of us ne'er-do-wells who probably, didn't have the highest GPA of our graduating class, who had a running social commentary as people walked across the stage and got their degrees with honors. And so as one of us would walk across the stage, we would yell, "Just barely." And that was kind of how it felt.
So it wasn't only fun, it was also the sense of the depth of humanity that happens in live theater. It happens in many other art forms as well. It's not merely entertainment, that what you're doing is delving into deeply the human condition. And that's what you do as a novelist, what one does as a novelist, what one always hopes to do. That's what the great theater artists always do. And that was sparked in me here at the University of Tulsa, in the productions, in the plays themselves, in the choices of plays themselves, and very especially by those faculty members who said, to all of us, this is worthy, you are worthy.
I hope the TU students that are there today can really make an impact on the things that I see going on in society, like the lack of face-to-face contact, personal interaction around things. I hope that being raised in a small environment, they understand the need for that it's not all about texting and social media, it's about personal contact.
You look around the country or the world at great cities and cities that have made amazing transformations and have been successful. Almost all of them have at least one outstanding university that is known for the outstanding academic success. And I believe that TU is that for Tulsa, and I hope that Tulsa recognizes that and embraces that and really works to make sure that we do everything we can to help that benefit both TU and Tulsa.